Good morning. So you guys are the first people to hear about this topic, besides my wife, who is sick of hearing about this topic. So she's hoping I'm going to stop after this. So I'm not going to talk about myself. Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction. I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome and overcoming it. So when I think about any topic, I start with going to Google and I start looking up definitions. So I looked at a couple of definitions. So I thought about confidence, which I lack. So, according to, I forgot which dictionary this was, the feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. I looked at the word imposter because I feel that I am one. And the definition is a person who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others. So I often feel that I pretend to be someone else, but I don't think that I do it for the purpose of deceiving. So I didn't feel that that rang true. I wasn't sure if I was going to find a definition for imposter syndrome, but actually I did. So this seems to be something that it's not something that I deal with. I think a lot of people deal with this. And so this is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. So this is spot on. So well done for whoever came up with this one. So let's talk about my journey. So it's been an eventful few years. I was in a very successful, I say it, but I don't believe it, but I was a very successful corporate executive. It was my first job. I was an entrepreneur when I started out, and then my first and only job was at Etisalat. I was there for 10 years. I didn't know anything about telecoms. I'd never had a job. I didn't know anything about corporate finance. And I started, and in 3 years I was the youngest VP, in 4 years I was head of Asia, and 5 years I was global head of M&A. And I felt like something went wrong, and I felt bad for everyone else who I crossed over, or who were passed over. From the outside, it looked like this. And, I appreciate that it looked like a rocket ship, but the reality is, it was full of self-doubt, a lot of adversity. I knew nothing about everything, and I had to think and study and read and prepare every single day. When I wanted to leave Etisalat, people said, "Don't leave, Asher. It's the best thing that ever happened to you. You won't make it on your own." But somehow, I did okay. I couldn't figure out why I did okay, but I somehow landed on my feet. I felt like I was probably the luckiest person alive. Backtrack a little bit. My name is Asher. I looked up what that means, and it means blessed. And so I feel like I was blessed and I was lucky. I asked a bunch of people in my network, why they thought that they continued to want to maintain, engage relationships with me after I left my corporate role. I heard the usual crap, and it didn't really help me with what I was thinking about. But I spoke to my boss, my former boss at Etisalat, and I spoke to my wife. And they felt that it was because I always had a different perspective. And so my wife sends me a lot of interesting things, self-helps. She's sick of me talking about this crap, so she constantly WhatsApps me all sorts of messages. And so she sent me this when I was thinking about coming here and talking about this. And so my boss's perspective was, you can't change your situation, but you can always change your perspective. And what he always liked about me and why he took me from being an analyst to a VP was because he felt that I had this perspective. I was always able to look at things in a different way. Anyway, let's talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. That was my journey, but what was my approach to overcoming my daily fears and my daily uncertainties? So I took control of my own narrative and I changed it. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? And so when I started to think about what's the worst that could happen, there was two possible scenarios. A, I'm a fraud. But then I thought, well, that means I'll continue to learn and develop, right? It's about the journey. It's not about that one moment. So I'll be a fraud. I'll learn something about myself. I'll learn something about a topic, and I'll develop. Or I'll actually discover that I know something about what I'm talking about. And if I do that, then that'll help to build and reinforce my confidence. Now, I'd love to tell you that it was B, but the reality was mostly A. And I continued to ask the stupid questions. I continued to open up to my vulnerabilities, and I said stupid shit, and people informed me otherwise, and I learned and I developed. And now I feel more confident about being B. So what are my key takeaways? Acceptance. It is what it is. The situation is what it is. And you are who you are. You cannot change that today. But you can take risks, and you can change yourself in the future. So my takeaway was accepting who I am and taking risks. Because if I don't take risks, I won't develop and I won't evolve. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Unfortunately, I haven't found a magical pill or magical solution to overcoming imposter syndrome. So this may not have been as useful as some of you may have hoped. But my journey is certainly more interesting for it. And I cannot believe that I made it in less than 7 minutes.